Hey guys, Bud Elliot back here again on Cover 3. It's another summer school episode today. We are talking Ole Miss, and if you want the best Ole Miss coverage, you go to Inside the Rebels. My man, David Johnson. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, thank you, Bud. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I know we were talking a little pre-show that David went to most of the spring practices out there. Their Ole Miss coverage is absolutely dialed. Ole Miss last year, 8-5. Bill Connolly in the power ratings had him 18th. I think ESPN had him like 22nd. So a pretty nice season there for the Rebels. Played pretty well on offense. Defense was a bit up and down at times. I'll start on the offensive side of the ball where shoot, with Lane, you pretty much expect they're going to score points every single year because the guy just another Ole Miss game, another guy running wide open for the Rebs. So quarterback situation, Dave, is where I have to start. I'm interested in this. They took Spencer Sanders from Oklahoma State, and we've already done the Oklahoma State episode. Not really sure how big of a loss that is for the Cowboys based on how he played last year. But in prior years, he had played well. They get Jackson Dart coming back. They took Walker Howard from LSU. How do you see this position sorting itself out?
Yeah, I think it's Jackson Dart's job. Um, you know, I watched 12 of 15 spring practices, and Jackson Dart won every one of them. If you want to talk about quarterback comparisons. Now, in the Grove Bowl, and we all know the spring games can kind of be scripted to come out the way everybody wants them to come out. Spencer Sanders looked great. But if you want to take the spring as a whole, Jackson Dart held his own and, if not, gained ground in the quarterback battle. Walker Howard is the guy of the future. Everybody knows that. I think Walker even knows that. And, I think he's even admitted that. He's anxious to learn behind Jackson Dart and Spencer Sanders. And when Jackson Dart goes to the NFL draft or graduates, the job is Walker Howard's because Spencer Sanders only has this 1 year left to play. A little perplexing, Sanders coming into Ole Miss to take that spot, knowing he's got to battle a returning starter. But he's still here. He's on campus this summer. He came back. And we'll see if he's here when fall camp opens up. I think that's where we have to leave it because I do think this job belongs to Jackson Dart.
There were some things I thought Dart did well last year. Sack avoidance is something we don't talk about all the time on the show, but his sack avoidance was really, really good. Sacked on less than 5% of his dropbacks. I know Ole Miss is a lot of quick game and screens and whatnot, but it did feel like he was pretty good at dodging sacks. However, he did hold on to the ball a lot in dodging some of that pressure, and then would take some chances throwing it. 11 picks is against 20 touchdowns, a little high. What differences have you seen in Dart this spring?
Yeah, I think you see a maturation process where he has a better grasp of the offense. He's much more comfortable in his own skin, if you will. He's not trying to over impress. He's if the pass is not there, he's throwing it away, and he's coming back on the next down to try to make the yardage. And as you just mentioned, he's a sneaky good runner as well. Jackson Dart is not a one-dimensional drop back quarterback who cannot run. He can make things happen when he gets out in the open field. All three of those Ole Miss quarterbacks have that tangible about them. But Jackson Dart. I think he's the guy, and of course he's got Quinshon Judkins in the backfield, and that's going to help the Ole Miss passing game too, because opposing defenses are going to have to respect the Rebels' ability to run the football.
Speaking of running the football, Quinshon Judkins was a revelation last year as a freshman. Almost 1,600 yards, did score 16 touchdowns, first down on almost a third of his carries. Did you see this coming? Because
yeah,
we heard a little buzz, but not 1,600 yards buzz.
No. Listen, so he was an early enrollee, so we got to watch him in spring ball last year, and it takes a little while to get to know the freshman's numbers and everything, and we're like, man, who's that number 4 out there? Look him up. That's Quinshon Judkins. Okay, man, this kid's got a chance. The way he was breaking tackles and spinning off would-be tacklers. And then we saw that carry over into fall camp. So did we know he was going to run for 1,600 yards and score 16 touchdowns? No. But did we think he could be a factor in the Ole Miss offense? Absolutely. He is a special talent. I'll be honest with you. He's the best collegiate running back I've ever covered. And, he's.
Now, I got to ask you, were you there for Deuce McAllister?
No, I was not. But
okay, because that's the obvious Ole Miss one my head would go to.
Yeah, no doubt about that. But no, I've been here on this beat for 13 years. He's the best one to ever come through, obviously. And, I just think that, his sophomore season, he's handled that success so well. And we asked him, hey, and everybody knows he's got a huge NIL deal at Ole Miss. We asked him, hey, Quinshon, does that put more pressure on you? And he's like, no. He's like, I'm going to play my game. I know what I've got to do. I know what I can do. And that's what I'm going to do. And I believe him, to be honest with you. A little 3-star recruit that I don't mean little, but, out of Pike Road, Alabama High School. And he's turned into one of the biggest stars in the college game. And I think he's going to carry it on this year.
I was talking to Cole Kublik on the SEC Network, and he thinks Judkins is the best running back in the country. I was like, that's high praise, man. Like I'm kind of a Nick Singleton guy, I think, for Penn State, but like clearly, I mean, he's in that discussion to be sure. And they threw the ball very well last year off play action. They threw the ball very well on rundowns, but when they got behind the chains, there was a noticeable drop off. I mean, they were like bottom half of the country in efficiency when they were behind the chains, and that's, to me, it kind of says some stuff about what this team was as a drop back passing team, like play action, RPO. When the opponents had to actually have some respect for the run because Judkins is a stud, they were good throwing it. When they weren't, it was problematic. And now they lose Malik Heath and Jonathan Mingo, but I like some of the names they brought in as transfers. Do you think this room is like as good as it was last year? The pass catchers?
I don't know. We've seen what Zachary Franklin can do at UTSA. He's got to do that in the SEC, and that question remains to be seen as to whether or not he can do it. There are good receivers in that room. There's no Jonathan Mingo, and even I don't know if there's a Malik Heath. And you talk about Heath, but it looks like Heath is about, he signed as a free agent with the Green Bay Packers. Looks like he's going to make that roster, reading things out of Green Bay. So, and Mingo, of course, being a second-round draft pick. I'm not going to go as far as to say they've replaced those guys. But, Lane Kiffin's never short of guys to catch the football. They've got a good room. It's just a question of which one of those young guys, along with Zachary Franklin, is going to emerge as the go-to guy. And honestly, Bud, they helped themselves in the passing game at the tight end position as well. You haven't seen them throw to the tight ends very much. Not last year. Michael Trigg had some injury issues and some other issues. The USC transfer, he's back, but they went and got Caden Prieskorn, a kid that's highly rated out of the portal from Memphis. And, Prieskorn is a 6'6", 250-pound prototypical NFL tight end who can do everything. He can run good routes. He can catch the ball. He's got speed. He can put his hand in the dirt, block somebody. And that gives Ole Miss two tight ends that I think you're going to see them utilize this year.
That makes a lot of sense. I actually I play a little college football DFS, the daily fantasy stuff, and some of the no free ads on the show, but the various companies out there. And Prieskorn was reasonably priced pretty often last year for Memphis, and I was all happy to take it for sure. Offensive line wise, Nick Broker does leave on the offensive line. Everybody else who played a decent number of snaps returns, though, for a pretty veteran unit, which was decent, but like not great last year. I guess you could say. I mean, if you're in the West, you got to block a lot of guys who are going to make money in the game for a long time. They take what, one transfer, I think it was,
No, they
or
took two transfers. They took
two. Okay.
Vic Kearney from Washington and Quincy McGee from UAB. Um, and I'm not sure either of those guys will be the answer at Broker's guard position. I think I think I'd keep my eyes on honestly a true freshman named Bryson Sanders, who is out of the state of Tennessee. Looked very good in the spring. I would not say Sanders would be starting when they play Mercer and Tulane early in the year, but let this season wear on, and I think Bryson Sanders could work himself into that lineup.
I mean, that would be very interesting, but certainly a guy that's probably in their first two off the bench if he's not starting.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And there's a guy, Eli Acker, been here for a long time, a veteran. Acker would also be a candidate to fill that Broker spot.
Makes a lot of sense. Defensively, they do make a coordinator change. They bring in Pete Golding. I don't know if we've seen a bigger gap between the fan opinion of a coach and the head coach's opinion of a coordinator than we did with Pete Golding. I mean, like Nick Saban clearly had a lot of respect for Pete Golding, and I mean, got to respect the guy's acumen quite a bit. They made a change there after Golding left, bringing in Kevin Steele in Tuscaloosa. What has the defense looked like under Golding so far? Like, are there noticeable differences? Can he run what he wants to run?
Yeah, I think he can to an extent. Now, we all know he doesn't have the same bullets at Ole Miss in his gun as he had at Alabama yet. Golding, I think his biggest impact thus far has been on the recruiting trail. I mean, he is getting those caliber players to have an interest in Ole Miss, to visit, and some of them are already even in the commit column. From a defensive scheme standpoint, you're going to see a lot of multiple stuff. They're going to be more aggressive. I think you're going to see Ole Miss rush the quarterbacks, off the edge, in the middle of that defensive line. And the big thing about their defensive line, they've got Seth Johnson returning as well as Jared Ivey, both accomplished starters at the Power 5 level. But the defensive tackle positions where J.J. Pegues, the Auburn transfer, sits now, they went and got Josh Harris from North Carolina State.
I love this kid.
Look, I do too. And what I saw in the spring is, the guards and centers are having to go, okay, which one are we going to double team this time? Because one of them is going man-on-man and free. Most of the time that was Pegues, and Pegues can get to the quarterback. So I think you're going to see an improvement in the pass rush. The linebackers, they got Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste from UCF, Monty Montgomery from Louisville. I think that's pretty much a wash with what they had last year. Both of those guys will be serviceable SEC linebackers. Where the big question mark is on the defensive side of the ball is on the back end. Because when you look at what they lost in the transfer portal, it's tough to replace, and who they lost them to. Davison Igbinosun went to Ohio State. Tyshim Johnson went to Oregon. Miles Battle went to Utah. So, all three of those guys would have been starters in the Ole Miss secondary. They're going to be starting for other top 25 Power 5 teams this fall. So Ole Miss has gone to the portal and they've tried to replace this talent. I don't know if they have, just to be honest with you. And, that's something that you're going to have to watch as the season progresses. They've gotten several transfer portal kids in. They've got a couple of key guys returning back there. But to me, that's the question. They'll be good on the defensive line. Depth's not great, but the first unit will be very good. Linebackers will be serviceable. How's that back end? How's the secondary? Because, again, you go back to losing those three guys, and that hurts a lot.
So if you want a fun Josh Harris story, he's got to be like a senior, right? Or
I think he's got 2 years.
Fourth year in college?
I think he's
trying to
got,
think back here.
during COVID, I think he's got 2 years left.
Okay, so it would have been remember the Army All American Combine that they do every year in the Alamo Dome down in San Antonio, and this guy and they run a couple thousand kids through there, so it's hard to keep track of them all. But this guy was just straight up dominating people, and he got his jersey ripped off. Okay, but I didn't see him before he got the jersey ripped off. So this guy had no jersey and no number, and so you're there in the dome in the stands trying to figure. I'm like, who the heck is this guy? And like I didn't figure it out until a while later. I was like, oh, okay, that the hair kind of looks similar, and like yeah, that's that guy. But like I think there's some potential there. Like I know he may not be an amazing pass rusher, but he's a wide body who's got some heavy hands. I'm glad you mentioned the secondary stuff, and I want to circle back to that. But first, I have a real concern. I feel like with pass rush here on this team, like Tavius Robinson basically never came off the field and was their most effective pass rusher. I thought by a lot. Like, how do they replace Tavius Robinson?
Yeah, I don't know that you do. You've got Cedric Johnson, didn't go through spring, but he should be 100% when fall camp opens up. Jared Ivey, who's proved himself at Georgia Tech, and he was a valuable, asset for Ole Miss last year. But there, Pete Golding's going to do some creative things, and I think you're going to see linebackers blitzing more often. You're going to see the defensive line pin their ears back and come after it more often. And again, I think Josh Harris is the key, because you put that big body along with Piggy's huge athletic body there in the middle of the defense, and they're going to be stunning and whatnot. Josh Harris is somebody you've got to account for. And again, not a great pass rusher, but man, he's a wall against the run. And J.J. Piggies is a great pass rusher. So, I think it's kind of pick your poison there. I think they're going to be okay. I really and truly do. They've got a few guys behind those guys that'll be able to give them some pretty good snaps, I think. My question so much is not the defensive front as much as it is the back end, because the back end, we just don't know. We just don't know. John Saunders transferred from Miami of Ohio. Had a really good spring, I think, and I think he's going to have a good season. But, you lose guys to Utah, Oregon, and Ohio State, and you're getting them in from Liberty and Miami of Ohio. That should raise a question mark right there.
So I do have a question on Deshaun Gaddy. He was one of my favorite guys 5-6 years ago as a recruit, and I really couldn't figure out why he wasn't a Power 5 guy, and maybe he didn't run a good verified time. But when I watched him in 7-on, I liked him. I thought North Texas kind of got a steal, and there's like a little like, all right, okay, I wasn't crazy that now that Ole Miss took him. Like, does he look okay?
Deshaun Gaddy just got to Ole Miss at the end of the school year. Wasn't here for spring ball, so we haven't seen him. He's here. He's 100% healthy. No injury issues whatsoever. Had a couple of hurdles to get over to get into school in time, because if you recall, he committed to Ole Miss way back in the first transfer portal cycle. And we expected him here in January. He never showed up, and finally did. I want to say it was at the very end of May, 1st of June. So only been here for a few days, few weeks. But he's another body you can throw back there. And like you, I'm impressed with his film at North Texas. And I think he's gonna be a starter. I hope he is. And definitely going to be a part of the rotation back there.
Some of this portal coverage, I know you've been doing this a long time, as have I. It kind of harkens back to some of these JUCO days where I was like, all right, when's this kid go graduate?
Yeah, no kidding. You're exactly right, man. The portal is I really don't know how to describe it, because it'll be a different way tomorrow. And while you may know what and you can't talk about the portal without talking about NIL. And while I may know what Ole Miss's NIL deal is for a kid, I have no idea what Alabama's put together or Auburn's put together. And that's where the guessing comes in, and I guess the analysis and whatnot. But yeah, it's a brave new world out there.
Absolutely. I we don't talk a lot of special teams on the show, but I do need to ask you here because Ole Miss's kicker last year. I don't follow kickers a lot, but like Jonathan Cruz was absolutely nails. 7 of 8 on stuff, 45 yards plus. Missed one extra point, but made 48 of them. Just one of the absolute best kickers in the country. He's gone, and in a team that probably will play a good number of close ball games. How does their kicking situation look?
Yeah, Caden Costa's back. If you remember, go back, 2 seasons ago as a true freshman, he was the starting kicker for Ole Miss, and Caden got kind of got burned by the NCAA a little bit on some illegal supplements that I think he bought at GNC that couldn't be in his body, and he got popped on a test for it.
The kicker's getting PEDs.
Yeah, exactly. So man, that was a funny thing. So he was suspended basically for a year. I think he could have come back and kicked in the Egg Bowl, but as you mentioned, Jonathan Cruz was doing such a good job. So he's going to he redshirted last year. So he'll be back as a redshirt sophomore, and he's going to be your kicker. Ole Miss.
Will he do kickoffs too, David?
Well, that's the question, because they did bring in a kid from Texas A&M through the portal, and we don't know. Costa's going to be your field goal extra point kicker. This kid could very well handle kickoffs for Costa.
Yeah, Ole Miss was a team last year. I just thought if they could just kick it in the end zone, would be more effective than some of their kick coverage.
Yeah, definitely
was. Question for you. So you're out there at practice. You're watching them. What's the position where the drop off is the largest between the starters to the backups? Not counting quarterback. That position where you're like, oh man, like they got to stay healthy here because the drop off is huge to these backups.
Yeah, defensive line. As good as I like the 4 projected starters of Seth Johnson, Jared Ivey, J.J. Peakies, and Josh Harris, there's not a lot of depth and experience there. I think going into an SEC season, you feel good if you've got 8 or 9, maybe even 10 that you can rotate in and out. I think Ole Miss is probably at 7 right now. And I think the drop-off is big, particularly at the defensive tackles between Josh Harris, J.J. Peakies, and what they have behind them. And even at the end spots. I mean, you bring up Tavius Robinson, going to be a huge loss. There's no doubt. They would probably not have beaten Kentucky had it not been for Tavius Robinson there at the end of that game. So defensive line is kind of scary. I have my primary concern is with the secondary, but when you're talking about drop-offs, I think it's the defensive line.
So schedule-wise, they did not get a lot of favors with this schedule this year. They have to go play Michael Pratt at Tulane, which it's Ole Miss to be favored and should be, but it's not a layup. Like they'll have to. You can't. I mean, their B game probably wins, but if Ole Miss plays a D game, like they could be in trouble there in New Orleans. Georgia Tech probably not ready to compete on that stage based on how Ole Miss handled them, recent. But it strikes me they have to play on paper the 4 most talented teams in the league, including at Bama and at Georgia. And then they got some tricky road spots, like going to Auburn. The Egg Bowl is on the road this year. Like, there's a lot of potential variance in this schedule. Like that home game against Arkansas on October 7th is really important. Like they kind of the stretch at Bama, host LSU, host Arkansas, at Auburn before you get kind of the reprieve of Vandy that's tough.
Yeah, it is. And you bring up the Arkansas game, and I agree with you. It's very, very important for Ole Miss this year. But, what happened between Ole Miss and Arkansas last year? Arkansas ran away from the Rebels. Ole Miss scored some trash points at the end to make it look close, but that game was a blowout at halftime. The year before, with the shootout in Oxford, KJ Jefferson versus who? Matt Corral. Matt Corral won that game for Ole Miss. KJ Jefferson throws a 2-point conversion pass out of the back of the end zone that would have won it for Arkansas. So without Matt Corral, I don't like that matchup. I'll be honest with you anymore. KJ he's a tough dude. Okay, he's a talented dude, and he grew up 20 miles down the road from Oxford, Mississippi. He wanted to come to Ole Miss. This game, Ole Miss did not offer him until very late in the process. He had been committed to Arkansas for a long time. This game means something to KJ Jefferson. So I don't necessarily like Ole Miss's chances in that game. And then, you're talking about Auburn. Well, who's the head coach at Auburn now? Hugh Freeze. Hey, Hugh doesn't want to lose that game. I can tell you that. He will roll out everything for that game.
If you watch Liberty last year, it's fairly obvious that Hugh Freeze, to me at least, circled some games that they wanted to have. And then I'm not sure. I mean, I don't want to accuse Hugh Freeze of not prepping for certain games week to week, but some of these performances, like you can't lose to New Mexico State, right? I'm kind of wondering if maybe they focus on some of the bigger games there at Liberty. I mean, yeah, he's got to have that ball game circled. I will say Lane Kiffin has whipped Jimbo on the chalkboard in the recent matchups. Like I think just kind of straight out coached him in some of those ball games.
But how does Bobby Petrino factor into that this year? You're going to have a better A&M team, a team with a better game plan. And
I think so too.
So if you want to look at Ole Miss's schedule in totality, the Tulane game is huge. They cannot go to New Orleans and lose. And in the past, Ole Miss has always scheduled that game because the Ole Miss fans love New Orleans. They love to go down there and party on Bourbon Street, have a great time, and then go to the Superdome and outnumber Tulane fans 2-1. This game is no longer in the Superdome. It's in an on-campus stadium at Tulane. And I talked to Ole Miss's AD, Keith Carter, who said they were getting between 3,000 and 5,000 tickets. I think that thing is closer to 3. So the stadium seats 30,000. It's early in the year. You can expect 27,000 people pulling for Tulane and 3,000 pulling for Ole Miss. And it's very close confines inside Yulman Stadium. So not going to be an easy place to go, but you've got to win that game. Because if you don't win that game, are you going to beat Arkansas, Auburn, Texas A&M, Alabama? They've got to go to Georgia. I mean, LSU. LSU is back. Okay, they're back. I mean, it's a tough schedule. And if you ask me to pick how they'll finish, I know we're dealing with Lane Kiffin here, and you always got to give him a little bit more credit than what you think he deserves. So I think 8-4, and you go to a bowl game. That would be big, but that means they've got to beat Arkansas or Auburn or Texas A&M or somebody out of that group, LSU, to get to 8 games, to 8 wins. And if you lose at Tulane, I mean, you're looking at Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, and your other 3 non-cons. You got to pick up a 6th win by beating one of those SEC West teams or Georgia. That's not going to happen. So, it is not an easy schedule.
No, it's certainly not. We were we were sitting around last night after the Elite 11. I was talking to some of the Georgia guys out here, and they're like, "Yeah, we think Georgia will probably have between like 12 and 15 draft picks again." I was like, "Okay, yeah, they'll be pretty good." That's
I mean, they've got it going on. There's no doubt about it, and a lot of people are writing them off. Well, there's no way they'll win a 3rd national title. I don't believe that. I believe Georgia
I think they could
win it all. Because there's going to be a quarterback. Kirby's going to have,
especially if Bama doesn't get quarterback figured out.
That's true as well.
Yeah.
Very, very true. But Bama's going to figure it out.
Yeah, I think so too. Dave, I really appreciate the time. This was fun.
All right, bud. Enjoyed it. Thank you.